We break into standard broadcasting tonight with shocking, unprecedented intelligence from deep inside the high stone bastions of Buckingham Palace, an extraordinary, clandestine reordering of supreme royal authority that has thrown the global establishment into total paralysis. Behind locked mahogany doors, shielded from the public eye, an unbelievable power shift has just taken place, tearing apart centuries of entrenched tradition in one ruthless, breathtaking stroke. What was framed to the press as a routine national address, a solemn final gathering for an ailing King Charles, was in truth the orchestrated execution of a silent coup. As the heavy gilded doors of the Great Hall swung closed, senior courtiers and diplomats stood frozen in disbelief. Sitting beside the traditional state regalia was a second, unexpected crown, casting an ominous shadow across the room. Across the hall, sitting farther away than ever before, Queen Camilla watched in mounting horror as her vision of ultimate influence evaporated into thin air. She had not been consulted. She was given no private veto, no governing role, and no seat at the table where the monarchy's fate would now be forged. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating with tense silence, as King Charles rose from his throne. His knuckles were white, his fingers trembling violently beneath the physical and emotional weight of a decision that would redefine the sovereign state forever. Then came the revelation that shattered every expectation. The king did not summon his traditional heir to the front. Instead, he called Catherine forward. Lifting the heavy ceremonial crown of leadership with visibly shaking hands, Charles publicly declared Catherine the new leader of the crown. This was no empty honorific or fleeting assignment. It was a permanent, legally binding transfer of active executive command. The proclamation handed Catherine direct power to govern public duties, manage internal family discipline, resolve bitter dynastic disputes, and control how the House of Windsor presents itself to the world. Catherine stood frozen, her chest rising and falling in measured breaths, her gaze locking onto Prince William across the marble floor. The future king remained perfectly still. With a single, slow, restrained nod, William acknowledged the seismic reality unfolding before him. Sensing the king's strength faltering, Catherine reached out and gently steadied her father-in-law's trembling wrist, a subtle, non-verbal signal that exposed the monumental weight of the moment to all who watched. Beneath the monarch's chair, concealed from the weeping audience, lay a sealed red folder containing the classified truth. The secret reasons Charles had passed over every senior royal to choose Catherine. But while the public witnessed a historic transfer of authority, behind the controlled expressions of the core four, catastrophic personal battles had already erupted. Catherine was elevated without warning into a lightning rod of unprecedented power. Camilla was violently displaced from the center of influence, left stranded in a cold political wilderness. Charles had voluntarily surrendered the final operational duty that made him feel indispensable as king, and William was forced to watch his beloved wife step directly into the line of fire. The moment the ceremony concluded, Catherine carried the gold crown into a secluded antechamber, placing it carefully onto a narrow oak table. The Prince of Wales title marked William as the heir to the throne, but Catherine now held total operational control over the monarchy's direction. She pressed her palms flat against the cold wood, her heart hammering in her chest as the heavy doors slammed shut behind them. William said nothing at first. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. Turning slowly, Catherine looked into her husband's unreadable eyes, her voice trembling with a quiet, devastating question, asking if this unexpected elevation had humiliated him, if Charles's sudden mandate had driven a wedge into their marriage. William took a slow step forward, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing emotion. He admitted that humiliation was not what frightened him. His terror came from a far darker place. He was watching his wife inherit the exact same suffocating pressure, ruthless scrutiny, and unbearable public expectations that had once relentlessly hunted and destroyed his mother, Princess Diana. He knew the agonizing cost of remaining composed while one's private pain became global entertainment. William reached toward her, but stopped short of touching the crown resting between them. In that moment, Catherine realized his stillness had never been resentment. It was pure, protective terror.
But before they could speak further, the door creaked open. Princess Royal Anne stepped into the dim light of the antechamber, her voice sharp and authoritative. She revealed that Catherine's crowning was neither luck nor popularity. It was the result of a secret test 6 months earlier at the Windsor Founders Ceremony, a night when Catherine stood alone, defied the king to his face, and changed the trajectory of the realm forever. The path to Catherine's elevation did not begin with public pageantry or a carefully planned succession strategy. It began 6 months earlier in the shadowy isolation of the king's private library, when she stood alone before King Charles and refused a direct royal instruction. The disagreement lasted less than 20 minutes, yet those tense moments permanently changed how the monarch viewed everyone around him. The occasion was the Windsor Founders Ceremony, a private gathering where senior family members approved future duties. But beneath its polished language sat a public duty framework that quietly excluded several younger royals from service. Charles believed the plan would shield the monarchy from scandal.
Catherine saw something far colder, a punishment imposed without evidence or explanation. The king summoned her immediately after the ceremony, placed the framework before her, and ordered her to sign. Catherine read the final page, closed the folder, and pushed it slowly back across the desk. She told him she would not attach her name to a decision that damaged the family while pretending to protect it. Charles felt the refusal like a betrayal, accusing her of challenging his authority when he needed unity. Catherine's hands trembled, but her answer did not. She warned him that while obedience might preserve silence, it could never restore trust once innocent people were condemned without being heard. Then she left, shaken but unwilling to retreat. In a recorded private conversation preserved in the family archive, William later explained the full cost. His wife had been prepared to lose patronages, access, and future privileges rather than reverse her position. She never briefed the press, never sought sympathy, and never used the dispute to weaken Charles. Her silence protected the monarch whose order she had refused. The next morning changed everything. Charles received an internal review showing 2 advisors had concealed evidence and exaggerated risks to justify the framework. The king realized Catherine's resistance had prevented a permanent injustice and exposed manipulation inside his own circle. Calling her back to the library, the monarch offered no apology, asking instead whether she would have defied him if William had supported the plan. Catherine held his gaze, answering that she would, because the crown cannot demand what it would be ashamed to explain. From that day, Charles began drafting a private leadership document built around judgment rather than obedience. He believed its existence was hidden, but Queen Camilla soon discovered otherwise. When the Queen learned Catherine was being considered for powers no royal wife had expected to hold, the hidden disagreement became a direct battle for Charles's final decision. With no aides present and the doors closed, Camilla and Catherine faced each other across a silent drawing room. Neither raised her voice, yet by the time the meeting ended, one relationship was broken beyond repair. Camilla had requested the conversation after discovering Charles was preparing a leadership proclamation, knowing an earlier draft placed her at the center of the transition. The Queen studied her carefully, accusing Catherine of accepting influence while pretending not to desire it. She claimed quiet restraint made the younger woman more dangerous than openly ambitious courtiers, because people trusted her while power moved toward her. Catherine answered that she had requested nothing from the king and would not apologize for being trusted when he believed the monarchy was at risk, disclosing she had already asked him to reconsider. Camilla's restraint broke. She revealed through a copy of the abandoned draft that Charles had first named her senior guardian of the crown, with Catherine serving beneath her. Pushing her chair back so sharply that it struck the wall, the Queen demanded to know whether Catherine intended to replace her beside the monarch. Catherine did not look away, replying that she intended to stand where duty placed her, even when that place was unbearable. Raised voices brought Charles into the room. Camilla asked whether the abandoned draft meant nothing. The king answered that it meant he had once believed loyalty alone could secure the future, but now he believed judgment mattered more. He announced the proclamation would be signed before sunrise. Camilla left without another word, closing the door with controlled force. The king then warned Catherine that family resistance was not the greatest danger. The real threat was the legal power concealed inside the document. The monarch had created the office of Leader of the Crown, a role separating control of public affairs and family discipline from the constitutional throne. Secret clauses permitted Catherine to suspend the public duties of any senior royal whose conduct threatened confidence in the monarchy, while explicitly preventing the office from passing automatically to Camilla, William, or future consorts. As morning approached, Charles pressed the royal seal onto the document and handed the silver tool to Anne, asking her to break it so it could never be reused. She snapped it in two over a silver tray, but before the ceremony began, one unsigned copy vanished from the private office, requested through William's digital code, threatening to split the family before Catherine's first council could even meet. The first sign of the new order did not come through another speech or grand royal decree. It arrived through a single chair being quietly removed from a private meeting room. Within an hour of Catherine's crowning, palace staff received revised instructions. Royal engagements were abruptly frozen, and the private council, once shaped around Charles and Camilla, was completely reorganized. Every change carried the same cold message. This was not public theater. Catherine had been granted genuine executive authority, and the monarchy's old balance of influence had ended before anyone could challenge it. Catherine called her first leadership meeting for that evening, inviting William, Anne, Edward, and a small group of advisors with active responsibilities. Attendance on the private council now depended strictly on present duty rather than rank or marriage. She also suspended every approved announcement for 48 hours to prevent rival factions from rushing through appointments or securing influence before the new structure settled. Camilla arrived at the chamber expecting her familiar place beside Charles. The queen consort stopped dead in her tracks when she saw that her name was missing and her chair had been removed. For several agonizing seconds, she said nothing, her unblinking gaze locked on the empty space. King Charles watched his wife absorb the exclusion, yet he did not ask anyone to correct it. That unyielding silence wounded Camilla more deeply than any public statement, proving he would defend Catherine's authority even if doing so damaged his own marriage. Turning away without entering, Camilla returned to her private sitting room, unclasped the historic brooch Charles had given her at the beginning of his reign, and placed it beside an unopened copy of the proclamation. Her hand lingered over the jewelry for a moment, as though the small gold object carried every promise made before power began moving away from her. Inside the council chamber, Catherine entered and immediately noticed the empty space where the queen consort should have sat. Refusing to let Camilla's removal become a display of public humiliation, the new leader ordered another chair to be brought in, but she did not invite Camilla back into the room. Her first decision was not an attack on the queen. She ordered a formal investigation into the missing copy of the leadership document and strictly forbade anyone from destroying correspondence, deleting records, or altering access logs. William examined the security report and felt the room tighten around him. The vanished copy had been requested through his private office code, a digital identity used to authorize official documents in the prince's name. The future king knew what that discovery implied. Someone was actively trying to make him appear disloyal to his wife before her very first meeting had concluded. Anne urged immediate restraint, while Edward warned that the false trail could split the family faster than any leaked document. Catherine listened, but her eyes remained fixed on William. He waited until the advisors had left and the heavy oak doors finally closed. The prince asked the question neither of them had dared to face since the crown touched her head. "Do you truly trust me?" The monarchy could survive a public struggle for influence, but it could not survive if Charles's final act created doubt between the future king and the woman chosen to lead beside him. When the doors closed and every advisor had gone, there was no king, no future sovereign, and no newly crowned leader in the room. There were only William and Catherine, husband and wife, standing on opposite sides of a decision neither had requested. For the first time that day, she admitted she was afraid. For the first time, he confessed that part of him had resented learning of Charles's choice with the rest of the world. William remained near the door while Catherine stood beside the closed crown case. No aids, documents, or ceremonial symbols separated them. The future king explained that he supported the purpose of her office,
but the secrecy had cut deeply.
Charles had denied him the chance to prepare, defend, or even reassure his wife before the announcement placed her beneath the nation's judgment. Catherine lowered her voice, admitting that the king had told her only minutes before the ceremony and demanded a promise of silence, even from William. Charles feared the decision would be blocked before it became official, yet she understood what that silence had caused. Her husband had been forced to discover her new authority while the entire world watched his face. The prince confessed that the secrecy made him feel less like her partner and more like a threat to her leadership, wondering whether the palace believed he might stand against her. She answered that her fear was different. Refusing Charles could leave the monarchy without direction, but accepting might create a rival court around her, competing directly with the future sovereign. William then explained what the security review had uncovered. The office code came from an outdated terminal accessible to several senior staff members, a digital authorization linked to a household, not proof of his personal action. The discovery cleared him of deliberate involvement, but proved someone wanted suspicion to fall between them. Catherine opened the velvet case, lifted the crown of leadership, and offered it to her husband, declaring she would return it if he believed it stood between them. William looked at the crown, closed the lid, and pushed the case back toward her. He told her the burden was not the enemy, secrecy was. They promised that every major decision would be discussed privately before reaching council, binding their partnership in honesty above rank. United behind closed doors, William and Catherine were ready to face the country. But outside the castle walls, a single front page had already transformed a private royal transition into a sweeping national reckoning. By sunrise, the secret language of the proclamation was no longer secret. The country awoke to the revelation that Catherine had not simply received a ceremonial honor. She'd been entrusted with active executive leadership of the royal family. Crowds gathered beneath heavy gray skies. News broadcasts interrupted regular programming, and headlines declared the dawn of a new royal era. Yet beneath the public excitement lurked a deeper, darker question. Not whether Catherine was loved by the masses, but whether King Charles had altered the monarchy forever. Catherine read the first reports in silence. The leaked document confirmed her authority over public engagements, family representation, charitable strategy, and internal standards. These powers dictated who spoke for the institution and how disputes would be resolved. This was no decorative appointment. It placed real responsibility squarely in her hands, long before William would inherit the throne. Palace staff released the complete proclamation within the hour to stop selected passages from being twisted into claims that Catherine had replaced her husband or seized constitutional control. William remained the undisputed heir to the throne. Yet the public now understood that his wife would guide the family's daily direction. Catherine felt the warmth of public support, but the media coverage quickly turned painful. Commentators began describing her elevation as proof that Charles no longer trusted his son, an accusation striking at the core fear she and William had only just confronted in private. The future king refused to let that suspicion grow. He insisted on walking beside her during their first public appearance, knowing that even a few steps of distance would be weaponized by critics as evidence of a divided court. Rain fell outside Buckingham Palace as hundreds gathered under black umbrellas holding front-page newspapers depicting Catherine beneath headlines announcing the historic shift of authority. Television crews broadcast live commentary, calling the moment a transfer of active leadership without an abdication. Then Princess Royal Anne broke her silence through a recorded palace statement, confirming the king had prepared the decision after Catherine halted the Windsor framework in justice. Her account changed the meaning of the entire moment. What critics had called ambition was revealed as moral courage. Catherine had earned the king's trust by refusing him when obedience would have harmed the family. Listening to the crowd chanting Catherine's name through the downpour, Charles turned to Anne and whispered that the public understood why he had chosen her. Anne answered softly that they understood only part of it. The greater weight still belonged to Catherine. When Catherine finally stepped forward to address the nation, she wore no ceremonial crown, leaving it secured inside the palace vault to demonstrate that leadership was defined by duty rather than display. Charles sat nearby, exhausted but calm, while William stood steadfast at her side. Camilla watched from a measured distance, her former influence completely undone. Catherine began by confirming that William remained the future sovereign,
and that her role existed solely to fortify his eventual reign. She declared that service within the House of Windsor would now be measured by conduct, consistency, and public trust, not by marriage or rank. Turning toward Camilla, Catherine acknowledged her years of dedicated service beside Charles, refusing to transform the Queen Consort's loss of influence into public humiliation. Camilla lowered her head in silent submission, accepting a future she could no longer shape. Catherine then exercised her supreme authority for the very first time. She mandated that every major internal decision require written justification, preventing hidden advisors from controlling the crown through secrecy.
She also restored consultation rights to royals affected by past restrictions, permanently correcting the injustice born at the Windsor Founders ceremony. As the address ended, King Charles took Catherine's hand in both of his and bowed his head, not as a sovereign surrendering the throne, but as a father acknowledging his final duty was complete. The king withdrew from public leadership with his constitutional position intact, while William continued preparing for kingship. Charles's final act had never been a rejection of his son or an attack on Camilla. It was a dark, fatalistic admission that the crown needed someone willing to challenge power without seeking it. Catherine stood at its center, carrying its future with William beside her, as the monarchy united around a leader who had never asked to rule. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next.